And I see the collaboration. So when it comes to pharmacology, Bezmialem University, they collaborated mainly with Istanbul University, and this one you have the top 100 here. And that's actually a good way of looking and analyzing the data. Let me go back to my search, and I want to speak about that. It's quite interesting, the search history. When you do a search, so you remember tuberculosis and HIV and pharmacology, I can save this search. You don't have to search for it every day. You just save it. You run the search and you save it. And of course you need to be signed in first, so I need to connect with my account. And how do you put the app? So you type in your email address, you need to create an account for that. It's free. And if I sign in, I will have access to my Web of Science, because you know Web of Science is given on the IP address of your institution. I can use Web of Science anywhere as far as I have internet. So now I'm connected, so I believe this is no. Yeah? No. Never? No. I'm improving. So here I can save this search, and I call it tuberculosis HIV. Okay? And I want to save it. Every time a new paper is published talking about tuberculosis HIV, I want to receive a notification. I want to know the author, title, source, and abstract. And I just need that. I get the email notification on my phone, and I can receive the notification on daily basis, weekly, or monthly. Okay, and I just click save. All right. I'm not really interested in that topic, so I'm not saving it. But okay, let's see. So that's my topic. So every week from now, I will receive, each time there is a new paper talking about that. Okay. So that's quite interesting. That's a good way of staying up to date on the particular topic. All right. So let's go back to my search history. You remember it was tuberculosis and HIV. One interesting, we were talking about journals indexed and not indexed. Imagine you work on that topic and you want to publish in the right journal, the most relevant journal. So the question is, what is the list of journals that are indexed and peer reviewed? Okay? So here you could have a quick answer to that question. You just go to source titles. If I click more options values, when it comes to tuberculosis and HIV, the most publishing journal is the first one. Okay, so you have by number of papers, 87 and 48. And you know that these journals are indexed. So we have analyzed them, we selected them on those very strict criteria. Okay, so that's a quick list that you can reuse. Okay, one analysis you can run as well is, you could ask yourself, who is funding research on tuberculosis and HIV globally? So the question is, from where the researchers got money, who funded their project? So here we have the funding agencies, the list of all the funding agencies that appear in those 700, I think. So if I click on, let's say this one, I'm interested in knowing what the Swedish Research Council has funded. And you could ask me, how do we know that? It's simply because the authors, they give credit to the funding agency. So this work by these, I don't know how many researchers. These 7 researchers, they are affiliated to several institutions, US, Sweden, Ethiopia, Germany. They got funding from 3 different funding agencies: European and developing countries, Swedish International Development Agency, and Swedish Research Council. As I said, how do we know that? If you read the full text, you will find that the authors, they give credit. They say, this work was supported by research grants from this and that. We translate this information again into this table. Okay? If you happen to work on, for example, pharmacology in Turkey, and you want to know who is funding pharmacology research in Turkey, that's pretty much straightforward. I can show you how to do that. Let me show you. Any questions so far on this? So when it comes to funding, so you can do, for example, what was it? It's not there anymore. So here if I go to search history, if I search for your institution, and maybe the rector or the president will be interested in where do we get money when we do research, and that's a quick answer. Tubita, Customer University, well, these are the same, and then your institution as well. Okay, but if I do it the other way, if I go for advanced search, I want to search for the country, and I'm looking for the equal sign. Right here. Equal. Okay. Turkey and WC, which is Web of Science category, pharmacology and pharmacy. So 14,000 papers classified as pharmacology with at least one researcher from Turkey. I can do my quick analysis on, it's mainly HTTP and then in Istanbul, and then you have like a quick ranking on number of papers. You have the most productive authors. And here you can see quickly who has, what is the funding? Here. Funding, again, to be targeted. So here you have that information. Let me go back to the topic that we were looking at. So we looked at the categories, document types, we look at the institutions, who has funded, where the papers are published. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't even try to read the paper. I was just analyzing who's doing what, with who, where was it published. I just want to understand who the landscape of that research topic, which is tuberculosis and HIV in pharmacology. Now, you see you have all these papers, and Daria, she was mentioning citation index, everyone is talking about citation index. You can use the citations, time cited. I can sort all these papers to see which papers were the most influential or used. I'm not saying they're better, I'm saying they're mostly used by the researchers community when it comes to pharmacology. So you see here, this one's been published in 2005, it's been cited 271. That's the higher number of citation when it comes to that topic. Okay? You can scroll down, and perhaps here, if I just click on View Abstract, the quick question is, I read this quickly, I just need a few minutes, and I decide, is it relevant or not? If it's not relevant, I just don't keep it. And we have something which is quite interesting, it's called highly cited in field. You don't always have it, simply because sometimes for that topic there is no highly cited. So let me explain what a highly cited in field means. Highly cited means that this paper, which was published in February 2011, received enough citation to be in the top 1% in that category, which is pharmacology and toxicology. So I need your attention on this. The way we do that, we look at Web of Science core collection data in the past 10 years, 10 years and a half. Okay, so this paper is less than 10 years old. And we classify the papers by category, 22 categories. So pharmacology and toxicology is one of them, space science, agriculture, zoology, whatever, or engineering. And we classify the papers by category and we rank them by citation. And then we say per year, for 2011, the papers which were published in 2011, we look at the top 1%. And this paper received enough citation to be in the top 1%. And you see 4 papers, you just need like half an hour to know what they're talking about. Highly cited papers, think about them as papers, recent papers that have been cited heavily in a short period of time. That's what a highly cited paper is. And if you look at science, we usually call them as node of science, because at some point, maybe this paper, they worked on something at the right time, at the right moment, the right issue, right problem, and science moved towards took a certain direction. So these 4 papers, they deserve some attention. I'm not saying that you need to cite them again. They might be completely irrelevant to what you're doing, but I think you need to know about their existence and what they're talking about. Okay? All right, so if I go back to my search again, I want to search for, where is it? This one? That's my topic, tuberculosis, HIV in pharmacology. And I sorted by time cited. All right? And you also have that interesting metric, which is called usage count. It's not citation. It's how many times the paper, or the record, sorry, it's not even the paper, how many times the record has been used by Web of Science users globally. So this paper, since 2013, was used 156 times, and 9 times in the past 6 months. And you have another one, which I prefer, personally, I'm not saying it's better. It's how many times papers have been used in the past 6 months. And you see here, for example, this one, 5 times, it's been used 12 times, it's been cited 5 times, it's been published in March, it's like 7 months old, and it's been used already 12 times. So you find some recent papers, this one, which is quite old, and it's still being used by the researchers or by the Web of Science users. What do we mean by usage? We mean that you click on the record and you save it. You save it to EndNote Online, or you save it to EndNote Desktop, or you export it as a text file. You basically save this data, the title, the abstract, you save it perhaps for later citation. It's not because a record can be used in Web of Science, but not necessarily cited. You just save the information. Okay?
What is the benefit of that paper seen 1,000, 2,000 times for the journal or for the article or for the websites?
Or what do you mean?
I mean, this, for example, one article is seen 4,000, 10,000 times. Is there any benefit for the article itself?
Cited or used?
Seen.
Seen? No, we don't capture the scene. We capture the usage.
Usage. What is the benefit of the usage?
Yeah. So we usually say time cited citation count is a proxy. It's a measure of the impact because the paper has been used. Because you cite that paper. The usage here in Web of Science is a proxy for interest. People are interested. They're not necessarily citing it. So it's like me on WhatsApp or by email. I send you a link and I tell you, okay, look, that link, that website, it's really good. And what you do, you just open the link and you just bookmark it. You save it. Doesn't mean you're gonna use that website for whatever the information. The citation is you use that work and you cited that work in your paper, which is different. Usage is completely different than citation. The usage is I open that record and I save it. I'm not citing it yet. Okay? Is it clear?
But there is a potential, we can say, for the citation, if they are using it.
Okay, let me open one record here. Let's have a look at this one. Is there any questions so far? Let's have a look at this paper. So, for sure, they're talking about tuberculosis and HIV and in pharmacology. Okay? That's quite interesting. You pretty much have all the email addresses of all these people. If you want to work with some of them, you have all their email addresses. What I wanted to talk about is this citation network. So these people, they wrote that paper, which has been cited 5 times, and I need to spend some time on this. That's from Web of Science core collection. It means that this paper has been used 5 times by other researchers, or maybe by themselves, could be self-citation, by papers published in Web of Science core collection in the database that you have access. So can be maybe, for example, books that are citing this paper. But here you have those 5 papers that are citing this one. So this is quite interesting. If you have a paper, you published a paper, which is there in a Web of Science core collection journal, you want to know who cited you. I think it's easy to understand. If someone cites you, they're using your work, right? And it's relatively easy to do that. If let's imagine I'm Sanjay Sharma, okay? And this is my paper, I just create a citation alert. Each time someone cites me, I want to know about it. Okay, I just create a citation alert. Someone who cites you is someone who is using your work. So it could be potential collaborator, can be potential competitor, or even stakeholder. If you work in pharmacology and you work on a new molecule or whatever, a new treatment, and you get a citation from Pfizer or Sanofi-Aventis, I think it's easy to understand that they are using your work. So you want to know about that, and that could be a potential opportunity. So you create citation alert, that's how you do it. On the other hand, if you find that this paper is really interesting and really relevant to what you're doing, here I'm interested in knowing what these people have cited. When they wrote that paper, what did they cite? What did they read and what did they cite? It's really, really simple. You click on this number, cited references. So they have cited all these papers, okay? And as you can see, some of them have the blue link, the link here in blue, and this one, for example, doesn't have it, simply because this one has been published in a journal or somewhere that we don't index. Okay?
Black hole.
Yeah. The one that you click here means that Lancet Infection Disease is an indexed journal. This one has been published, I don't know, but we don't index where it was published. Okay? International Journal of, I don't know, Pharmacology Science. This one, for example, or it can be, it is an article. We don't index that journal, but they're still citing it. The point that I want to make here is that I want to know what they have read and cited. So here I have the list. So they cited that highly cited paper. Let's have a look at this one. From here, I'm interested in what they have used to do their work. Okay? And something that I really like as well is the related records. I'm interested in knowing, so if I just open my 123, I want to ask Web of Science, is there any other paper different than this one, that has cited some of these 123 cited references? You got this point? I think it's really important. So I write a paper, I have 10 references. I want to search for other papers that cite some of these 10 references. And that's what we call related records. If I click on related records, I find 1,000, I will find thousands, 12,000. These people, July 2018, they cited 213, and they cited 16 papers that are also cited by these people. Do you understand? It's the shared references, the papers that are commonly cited by the researchers. So here, if I find this one, 16 here again, 13 here again, the question I would ask myself is, let's have a look at these 16. And you remember when we had thousands of papers, 128,000 and then 6,000. Here I have only 16 papers. I would need probably 1 month, 2 months to read all of them and to try to understand why these people and these 2 different teams or 3 different teams cite the same papers. Okay? Okay, if you have also that paper, you can keep track of the most recent citations. So these people, they have published this paper, which cites this one. And it's all very recent papers, 2018 papers, as you can see. 5 papers, 2018, 2018, 2018. Okay? Okay, is there any question on anything that we talked about? I need to speak about the impact factor. So here, if you look at this paper, which was published in Biomedicine and Pharmacotherapy, from Web of Science, when you search for in core collection, you have what we call the View Journal Impact. Okay, so you have, so the way we do it, once a year. So right now in journal citation reports, we have 234 categories. We classify all the journals in science and social science in those 234 categories, and we calculate the citation metrics. Impact factor is one of them, and we rank the journals by impact factor. For this journal, which is Biomedicine and Pharmacotherapy, the impact factor, the latest impact factor is 3.457, which means that statistically, when a paper was published in 2015 and 16, it received in average, it was cited in average 3.4 times. That's all what it means. It's a proxy, it's a measure of the performance of the journal. And as you can see, this paper got more, right? Some papers get 0, some papers get 10, 100. So you have, this is an average number of citations received by the papers published in this journal, published 2 years before the JCR edition, which is in this case 2015 and 16. And as you can see here, the 5-year impact factor, instead of looking at 2 years of data, you look at 5 years. The impact factor on 2 years is higher than the 5-year average. So the 2 years average is higher than 5 years average, which means that the impact factor is going up. If the 2 years average is higher than the 5 years average, on the graph you would see that the impact factor is going up. What is more interesting here is that this journal is classified in 2 categories, so research and experimental medicine, and pharmacology and pharmacy. And it has different ranks, simply because we have different numbers of journals, and also because each research area has its own behavior in terms of citations. So in all cases, it's ranked 69 out of 261 and 47 out of 133 journals by impact factor. That places that journal in the second quartile. Okay? So if you take 261, for example, 25% of 261, that's 65. Okay? 65, the first 65 journals, we call them Q1. And then 66 to 113, that's Q2. And then you continue until you get into the fourth quartile, which would be Q4. Okay, so in all cases, this journal is a Q2 journal. All right, it is in the second quartile of its category. And that's quite interesting because you would want to know, if you take up this one, for example. So this one is a different journal, biochemical pharmacology, different impact factor. And now it's in only one category, pharmacology and pharmacy, and it is in the first quartile. In the first 65 journals. It's like in football, you have Premier League and second division, etc. The same for the journals, based on the performance of the journal. And you want to be careful with that. It's not because you published in a Q1 journal, then your paper is better than if it was published in a Q2, Q3, or Q4 journal. Are we clear on this? This is a measure of the performance of the journal, not a measure of the performance of this paper or this author. Is it clear? So this is a measure of the performance of the journal again. It's like you take a class, you take an exam, okay, and the average score of the class is 50. If the student scores 75 out of 100, then he's performing better than the average, okay? And if a student gets a score of 25 out of 100, it's below the average. So it's better, would make more sense to look at the performance of this paper compared to all pharmacology and pharmacy papers published in 2018. But it's not because you published in a Q1 journal here, then your paper is better than the other, or you're a better researcher. Are we clear on that? It's like, I was part of the class where the average score was 75, so I'm good. But if my score was 25, I would be like below the average of that particular class. Okay? Will that make sense? You don't take the average. You don't take the average to analyze the performance of one individual within that group. What would make more sense is you take that paper and you put things into context, meaning you look at all the papers published in 2018, pharmacology, and you say, okay, in average, the pharmacology papers, they get 0.8 citation, and this one gets 1, so it's performing better than the world average. Okay? Rather than looking at where the journal was, where the paper was published, to evaluate the performance of the researcher. Okay, what I wanted to show you as well is, I'm not using my laptop, but let's try to do it. Here, what you could do as well, we talked about the basic search. You remember, we've done the topic search, which was tuberculosis and HIV. You can combine this, of course, and say, I want to look at tuberculosis and HIV, and where Turkey appears in the address, and I can play with, I don't know, let's say, funding agency where Tubitak appears in the name of the funding agency, and I can combine that again, I don't know, with what publication year, let's say 1990 till today. Okay, I don't know if we will get anything, but yeah, one paper talking about tuberculosis and HIV, where one of the funding agencies is Tubitak. Okay, and again, I have the email address. And when was it published? It was published in 2017. Something I have to talk about is the researcher ID and ORCID. These are platforms which help you to unify your name. So you see that person took the time to create a profile in 2018, because it's always a letter, 4 digits, and the year of the creation of her, or here, his researcher ID. So if I click on the research ID, I will have access to the profile of that researcher. And it's quite helpful because instead of searching for his name, I can search by his ID. Think of it as a passport number or national ID number. You only have one. So if I search for, instead of typing the name, I search by the ID, and he has 11 publications. He all added them 15th of May, one recently 24th of September. So I find his publication. And actually when you look at his profile, so you have his affiliation here, okay, and you have the subject. It's quite interesting. If you look at Turkey, I think this morning we saw that it was around 30,000 people, 30,000 profiles. So if I look at, to load it, if I search, you're supposed to have a map here, but let's do it differently. If I search for Turkey, okay, and I find that's also quite helpful, 34,000 people that created profile, and as you see, some of them put some information on what they're working on, the names that they have published with. So if I look at this one, okay, if I look at her profile, if I go back to Web of Science, let's search for this one. Okay, so here I have the 14 publication. How do you do that? You search for your publication and you just say, okay, these are my publications. So first of all, you need to create a profile on Researcher ID, of course, with the same email address and password that I'm using to access Web of Science. And you say, I want to save them to Researcher ID because I wrote this publication, and I send the author, title, source, abstract. And of course, you need to confirm. So here, once I confirm, these papers will be, reports will be added to my profile. Researcher ID is free.